Hey y'all, I am so excited to be recapping and discussing Interview with the Vampire Season 1. It was a really good show. I really enjoyed it. I know that I'm a little bit late, but Netflix just put up the show on from AMC about a month ago. So that's why I'm a bit late. Um, but I'm really glad to be talking about this show. Um, when I was a teen or preteen, I did read Interview with the Vampire and I did watch the movie, but I don't remember anything from either of those. So it's like coming in like fresh and new to all of this. I apologize if you're hearing any background noises. I do live in the city, and even though it's a residential area, it can get pretty noisy sometimes. So I apologize about all of that. So just bear with me. All right, so episode one starts off with Daniel Malloy, who is an investigative journalist. He has Parkinson's disease, we learn. He receives a package with tapes and a letter from Louis Dupont Dulac. I don't think I said that correctly. But he receives a package from Louis. Louis invites Daniel to Dubai to finish an interview that didn't go well 50 years ago. Louis wants to tell his life story. Louis says the reason why he wants to redo this interview is for truth and reconciliation. Even though Daniel has agreed to do this interview, he is no nonsense and he's very irritable. He's gotten older and he does not have time for any of the foolishness this time around. All right, so we get into Louis' story. He was a 33-year-old man when he became a vampire in 1910. So it's 5 years after his father's death, and the fifth year that he's the executor in charge of the DuPont Dulac Family Trust. So we find out what Louis does. He is a pimp. He runs a brothel in Storyville, which is sort of like the red light district of New Orleans during that time. And he is the main breadwinner for the family. We see Louis's brother Paul outside preaching to one of the sex workers. It's shown that Paul has some type of mental health issues, possibly schizophrenia. So Louis hems him up and sends him home. Lestat, the Leoncourt, is lurking and watching Louis and how he handles his brother, and he's just so enamored with this. So the next day, we meet Louis' sister Grace, who's preparing for her wedding, and we also meet their mother Florence. So Louis doesn't directly say it, but he does imply that he is a gay man. And this is when he's speaking to Daniel. So this is back in the present. So he said that he maintains this delusion of being straight by seeing Miss Lily, who is a sex worker that works for one of the white men who owns one of the businesses. So his name is Mr. Anderson. And this is where Louis and Lestat meet. Lestat is speaking with Miss Lily, and at first, Louis ain't really feeling Lestat. Okay, Lestat was like, "I'm surprised that a man of your race could even get through the door." Talking about it was a compliment to have that type of privilege to be able to be in a white establishment. But Louis is just like, "Who is this man? Talking like this." But Louis becomes immobilized because Lestat is literally mesmerizing him. So he can't do anything, he can't move, he's just sitting there simmering. So Louis said that he felt emasculated yet admired Lestat. We see this conflicting feeling of Louis that he has towards Lestat, this back and forth between admiring him, but also feeling negative things towards him. So then we get to another scene where the businessmen are playing cards. And Anderson recommends that Louis be the managing partner of a rooming house that the other businessman, Fenwick, has recently purchased. So they offer Louis 10%, which is ridiculous. It's a low price. And this is when Lestat starts to communicate with Louis telepathically. He's telling Louis that they're looking down on you and they treat you like trash. And Louis is looking like what the hell is happening right now? Like time is frozen and everything. And honestly, Louis did not seem concerned enough for me when this was happening. This man is communicating with you telepathically. He's frozen the room. Nobody's moving. And you're just curious as to what's going on. Like you're not scared. I would have ran out of there. And I wouldn't have talked to Lestat ever again if I could help it. But Louis, he did not run. He actually developed a friendship with him. He was seduced by him. He even invited Lestat to dinner with his family. So Lestat is there with his family, and at the dinner table, Paul is rightfully questioning Lestat because the birds told him to. And so Lestat gets really angry. He's talking about his abusive childhood and all of that. Um, so he's, shouting at the table, and then he apologizes to the family for his temper. Next, Lestat walks Louis home, and Lestat gives him a present, and it's Miss Lily. So I'm thinking, they're going to have some sort of threesome. But Lestat puts Lily to sleep and they float, levitate when Lestat is feeding on Louis. They call it un petit coup, the little drink. So it's just enough to keep the vampire fed, but not kill the victim. Louis said that he didn't consider himself gay at the time, but felt some guilt and shame when he would engage with other men, which is totally understandable for that time period and just in general. And so he talks about the feeling of intimacy that awakened in him after Lestat fed on him. Even though he felt like he vowed to never return to Lestat's home again because, that feeling that he got really scared him. So in the next scene, is Grace's wedding, and there's a really joyful scene of Louis and Paul tap dancing together, and I really loved it. And then the next scene is of Louis and Paul on the roof, and they're talking, and Paul is saying, he's questioning Lestat again. He knows that Lestat is a devil, and then Paul walks off the roof, and this was such a sad scene. I really like Paul, and so I was sad to see that he died. And Louis said that that was his last sunrise, and that he doesn't miss the sun because of so much memories that it carries. And it's so upsetting that the mother blamed Louis for his brother's death. I know she was grieving, and that can be a lot, right? But it was just really messed up that she blamed him. And what's even more messed up is that Lestat ambushes Louis at Paul's funeral. This really pissed me off because he was so rude and he was so inconsiderate. Louis is grieving, his mother is blaming him, but I am glad that Grace was there to be supportive of him. Louis also finds out the same night, I believe, that Miss Lily, who has always been Louis's sense of comfort, he finds out that she's dead. Lestat killed her. So Lestat preys on Louis in his most vulnerable moment, and that really just shows you like Lestat's character. So the scene when Louis is in the confessional is so powerful. He has to come to terms with his life, the choices that he's made, his sexuality, and the hold that Lestat has over him. Then Lestat shows up and he kills both priests. Like he punches one priest through the head, which was such a gruesome scene. And Lestat said that he's not the devil. And I disagree. Lestat plays upon Louis' shame and sorrow. He offers him the dark gift. It's like he's proposing to Louis. And Louis said that for the first time in his life, he felt seen. So he accepts his proposal and Lestat turns him. And so this is a union. It's like a wedding of sorts that happens. And so that's episode 1. And that was such a good episode. Started off with a bang. And so then we go into episode 2, where we start off with Rashid greeting Daniel. So the other workers are setting up for dinner, in which Rashid tells Daniel that Louis will meet him at course 7. And I had the same question as Daniel. How many damn courses are there? Like, how many courses are there? I love Daniel's facial expressions. His facial expressions are the expressions that I would give in this situation. So, this episode is about Louis getting used to being a vampire and all that comes with it. He's initially in pain and then his senses are heightened. He's basically high and he's under the apprenticeship of Lestat. Lestat teaches him how to hunt and how to be a vampire. Lestat is talking him through his first kill, which is a businessman, and Louis is haunted by his first kill. He tries to go home but gets burned by the sun and runs back to Lestat. Lestat teaches Louis how to read minds, and we find out that Lestat can no longer read Louis' mind because he is his maker. So Louis was fighting to keep his humanity, but he was finding it more and more difficult to maintain ties with it. His mother notices the difference in him, but she just thinks he's gay, which he is. Grace also notices some differences with him, like she sees that his eye color has changed, but she doesn't notice anything negative in Louis yet. So Louis is talking to another businessman. And this man is being very condescending. He called Louis an exceptional Negro. And so, out of a lifetime of anger and rage, Louis kills this businessman. You know, he's tired of having to tap dance for white folks. It gets old after a time having to do that. And excuse me if you hear any squeaking, it's my chair squeaking. So Lestat gets really angry because he killed an important man, and that will get everyone's attention. Lestat doesn't understand the racism that Louis has to face that drives Louis to this rage. I actually feel like Lestat is being very obtuse. Later on, Lestat asks how he can make this up to Louis, and Louis says that he wants to buy a saloon. So now he's the owner of the brightest saloon in the district, he says. And he said that he paid back every cent to Lestat, which was a source of pride to him. He said that he made a lot of money between 1912 and 1917. So Louis visits with Grace again, and he hasn't met the twins, and he's just now meeting his baby nephew. He had the urge to feed on his nephew. And can I just say that baby was so cute? He was so cute and plump. So we cut back to the interview, and Louis is just talking and talking. Both me and Daniel are like, but did you eat the baby? Did you eat the baby? And Louis didn't eat the baby. Thank goodness. But he does, leave the house in a hurry. He leaves the baby on the floor, and Grace is very confused about what has happened. So Louis says that he no longer kills. His last kill, I believe, was in the year 2000. He tells Daniel that the other vampires are plotting. One of them calls it the Great Conversion. I guess they're trying to take advantage of the panini. And can we just talk about the way that he was feeding on that man at the dinner table? And the man was just making small talk with Daniel. And Daniel's face was like, what? It was so hilarious to see Daniel's reaction. So Louis has donors now that he can feed on humans without having to kill them. So this is a good compromise for him. So Louis, there's a scene where Louis is talking about where he has to pretend to be Lestat's valet at the opera because he is a black man. And Louis is feeling upset about this. But I'm like, sir, you chose to be the companion of this white man in a time when black people barely had rights and were looked at as subhuman. What were you expecting? What were you expecting out of this relationship? So anyway, at the ballet, Lestat gets really angry about one of the performers, and he decides to bring him home to eat him. So Louis is disturbed by Lestat draining the tenor for hours, but he wants to please Lestat. So he is an accomplice. All right, so we get to episode 3, my favorite episode. And there are themes of racism, contending with being a black gay vampire. There's grief around his past life and grief around how being a vampire, impacts his relationship, especially with his family. Louis doesn't want to kill people anymore. He's having a really hard time accepting his new nature. But the Azalea, which is his club, is very successful. People are coming from all over. And in this episode, we meet Antoinette. She's the singer at the Azalea. And so Lestat is sleeping with Antoinette. He doesn't kill her after sleeping with her, which is something interesting that Louis notices. Right? And so Lestat continues to have relations with Antoinette. And so Louis asks Lestat, aren't I enough? And he shows huge vulnerability asking that question. And Lestat responds by laughing dramatically. He is an asshole. And he says, Lestat says, from time to time, I like a little variety. And so then Louis says, well, then I guess I can sleep with whoever I want. And Lestat did not like that. He did not like that at all. And you could tell because he's like, of course, as long as you come home to me, of course. Like, he was not okay with it. Um, and so then we get another scene where they're talking about like all of the ordinances that are coming up. So, the white men there, the business white men, couldn't take Louis coming up and possibly doing better than them. So they had to take him down a peg by passing these ordinances that would impact his business. So I think there was also a larger issue that was happening in New Orleans at that time. And I think this historically was happening where these ordinances were an attempt to segregate Storyville. So later on, we see that Louis reconnects with an old love who is currently in the army. And Lestat is in the corner with Antoinette just hanging off him. And he's watching Louis talk to this past love, like with jealousy. And so Louis and the past love, they do some more connecting in the bayou. So then Louis goes to visit his family to keep up appearances. Them children, his nieces and nephews, they ran away from him. They're like, oh my God, it's the ghost. And he hasn't seen his family for 6 months. So Mama Squeak, Mama Mary Agnes, tells him he's not welcome in their home, but she forgot that he owns the home. He pays the bills still. She is so annoying to me in the show. And then the brother-in-law had the nerve to puff up his chest at Louis to keep him out of the house. So Louis doesn't recognize his own strength. So he kicks in the door and the door flies into the house. And this happens in front of Grace and her children, and Grace did not want to see him anymore, which really hurt him because they had a close relationship before. And this is his only living sibling. So it was really hurtful that she was afraid of him and didn't want to see him anymore. So Louis gets home and Lestat done invited the whole army to the house for an orgy. Lestat is jealous and he's fixated on the fact that Louis got head from his army love because Lestat was creeping. He was watching them. And so Louis confronts him about being jealous, and Lestat admits that he is jealous. He stated that he doesn't like sharing. And he tells Louis that he doesn't have feelings for Antoinette. I don't know if I believe that or not. I mean, he somewhat likes Antoinette because he keeps her around. Um, so just feeling overwhelmed by his current situation, his brother's dead, losing his family, being pushed out of business because he's black. Louis pondering if he's actually the devil. So he's starting to spiral. He put up a for coloreds only sign on his business, which leads to chaos. He received a cease and desist order. He's harassed by the police, and so all this stress causes him to neglect his thirst and spiral further. And now we get to my favorite scene of the season. And this is when Louis breaks into Fenwick's home and he's sitting in his office and he lets Fenwick talk and talk and talk. He is just deadly quiet. And then he's like, why is your heart beating so fast? Okay, so Louis reads Fenwick's mind, and this bitch ass shoots Louis, which obviously has no effect on him. And then Louis is like, I'll let you reload. And Fenwick is reloading the gun. And while reloading, Louis slices Fenwick up. And Fenwick asks, what are you? And oh, Louis says to Fenwick, I'm a vampire. Oh, and that gave me so much chills. I love, love, love that scene. Jacob Anderson, he played the hell out of that scene. Okay, so he goes from, can you not use that word vampire in my place of business? He said that to Lestat before, earlier in the episode, to stating proudly that he's a vampire. And so he hangs Fenwick up in the town square like they did to black folk, and he put a white only sign over him. So this scene gives like pure horror. There's the music, there's a shot of Fenwick's intestines coming out, and then the woman is screaming. So it gave a lot of horror. So, on the one hand, I love Louis' rage and vengeance towards these white people, these white men, because it's absolutely valid. But in his rage, he did put other black folk in town in harm's way because now the white folk are retaliating against black folk in town. And so Louis is feeling guilty and he's trying to figure out how to help. And, there are buildings burning, and he hears someone screaming in a burning building, and he tries to save her. And it's Claudia. All right, so in episode 4, we get introduced to Claudia's diary through Rashid, which Daniel looks over. So Louis begs Lestat to turn Claudia, but Lestat is apprehensive. He eventually does it to make Louis happy. So new vampire Claudia is so cute in this episode. I am not from New Orleans, if you couldn't tell, and I didn't live there in the 1910s, if you couldn't tell. So I don't know if her accent is correct. I don't know if it's accurate, but to me, it's cute. I did see some people online saying that they didn't like her accent. It wasn't good or accurate. It was cringy, but I liked it. So Louis and Lestat are showing Claudia the way. She discovers that she can hear Louis' thoughts and he can hear hers, but Lestat cannot hear theirs because he is their maker. Now, Claudia has a huge appetite because she has the metabolism of a teenager. She's hungry all the time. And she's very observant too. She's very observant as it pertains to Lestat. So she's noticing that he's, keeping secrets from them. And we see that she's closer to Daddy Lou than Uncle Les. So back at the ranch, Daniel is observing Rashid. He questions him. This is setting us up for the reveal that happens at the end of the season with Rashid. So back to the past, there's Lestat, Louis, and Claudia are actually having a good time for a little bit. Lestat even teaches Claudia how to drive, and he hunts with her. But things change once Louis' mom dies. They go to the funeral, and it just doesn't end up well. They're not welcome there. And then later in the episode, I believe that Claudia is 18, 19 years old, and so she's developing budding sexual feelings, but she's trapped in this 14-year-old body. And so this is frustrating. This is confusing for her. She met Charlie and she's in love. I believe Charlie's might be like 18 years old. She goes on a date with him for ice cream, and it's very cute. And while making out in the car with Charlie one night, she gets a little too excited and accidentally killed him. So this really crushes her. She runs into the house and she's begging Lestat to turn him. But Lestat is being so insensitive towards her. He's just being an asshole. He forces her to watch Charlie's body burn. And I understand that he was trying to teach her a lesson, but he went too far as usual. So we get back to the present in Dubai, and Daniel, he said that Claudia's writing is Anne Frank meets Stephen King, and Daniel is he is a hot mess. um, So, according to Louis, Charlie's death ushered in the darkest time in their lives. So, that illusion of happiness was shattered. And I felt so bad for Claudia because she had no choice in becoming a vampire, right? She didn't choose this. She didn't have autonomy in this. And so Louis wanted to turn her for his own selfish reasons, mainly grief, which, we understand, grief can be really powerful, but it was still selfish. And Lestat selfishly turned her to save his relationship with Louis. So now Claudia is stuck in this teenage body. And so she starts to spiral. She engages in self harm, like opening, the sun latch, and she burns herself. And it is really sad to see her go downhill. So episode 5 starts off with Louis feeding off of Rashid, and I was uncomfortable because the scene went on way too long. I looked as disturbed as Daniel looked. So Rashid is answering questions from Daniel and speaking to him while Louis is feeding off of him, which was an interesting choice that they made with this. And I feel like this was more foreshadowing about Rashid's role and who Rashid really is. So we go back to the 1920s, and Daddy Lou and Uncle Wes, they've read Claudia's diaries because they're concerned about her. Well, Louis is concerned about her. And they find that she's been on a destructive path, trying to make her own vampire. She's killing people and she's not properly discarding them. And this puts them in danger. So, I guess they're in some sort of club and they're speaking to Anderson, and Anderson tells them that 56 bodies were found, and every single part of the bodies that were found had a part of them cut off. So this leads the police to searching Lestat and Louis' home because people are already starting to get suspicious about them. So Claudia's drunk, and we see that she has body parts all over her room. And I'm wondering how the hell Lestat and Louis did not smell those decomposing bodies. Um, so not Louis, Claudia feels lonely, and she feels like she doesn't have anyone to love her, or anyone to love. She asks legitimate questions about who's going to love her. She's like, is it perverts? Is it little boys? And of course, Lestat, he does not care. He calls her a mistake, and this sets Claudia off. So she reveals that Lestat has still been creeping with Antoinette. And Claudia again asked some legitimate questions. She's like, Louis, why didn't you take me to the hospital? I was still breathing. Now she's trapped in this in between life. It's awful having to be stuck as an adolescent. The hormones, the emotions, not being able to grow into her body. She has it really rough. And so Claudia decides to leave, and she's gone for 7 years. And this sends Louis into a deep depression. The house is dirty. I'm not really sure why Lestat couldn't, clean up the house. Louis blames Lestat for Claudia leaving. And then Claudia meets another vampire while she's gone. His name is Bruce. And at first, everything was going well, but then it turned sour. And it's implied that Bruce essayed her. So in the present, Daniel notices that there are some pages that are torn out of Claudia's diary. And Louis doesn't want to exploit the assault that Claudia experienced. And Daniel, he calls bullshit, and he challenges Louis. And Louis does not like that. So he makes Daniel's hand shake. He makes his Parkinson act up. And Rashid stops Louis. And Daniel gets up and slaps the hell out of Louis. And I thought that Louis was about to eat Daniel after that slap. But he didn't. He spared Daniel. So Daniel is good. And he was brave for getting up and slapping him like that. I would have been scared. So, back in time, Louis met up with Grace at the cemetery. She tells him that they're moving up north, I think maybe Boston. And she basically knows that Louis has changed. She's known for a while, and she's not sure what the change is, but she's noticed. And so she puts his death on the gravestone, and it's shared with his mother. So it's on his mother's gravestone. And so this really breaks Louis. And it's a heartbreaking scene to watch because he's just crying and crying. And so Claudia has been following Louis, so she sees this exchange with Louis and his sister, and she decides to come home. So Claudia apologizes to both of them and Lestat doesn't accept her apology. He taunts her about Charlie, and Claudia, she has had enough. Okay, so she wants Louis to leave with her to find other vampires. And that's when things escalate, and Lestat chokes Claudia, which leads Louis to attack Lestat. And so Louis and Lestat are having an epic fight all over the house. Then it seemed like the fight was starting to stop, but then it ramps up again. And we see Lestat dragging Louis by his neck out of the house, and then he flies him up into the sky. And Lestat wants Louis to tell him that he's never going to love him so that Lestat can move on. Instead, Louis is like, let me go. Get your paws off me right now. So Lestat was like, okay. And Lestat does exactly that, and he drops him, and Louis falls to the ground, and he's all mangled and bruised up. So then in episode 6, we see that Claudia is helping to nurse Louis back to health. In the present, Louis is talking about the incident. He's talking about Lestat's ability to fly, and they call it the cloud gift. He said that most vampires don't possess the cloud gift. Only a few ancient not empires, only a few ancient vampires have this ability. Um, there's a doctor in this episode, and he was so funny. Um, Daniel kept trying to engage him in conversation and referring to him, and the doctor's like, "I'm not here. I'm not here." He wants no parts in this whatsoever. Um, and then Daniel points out that Louis has Stockholm syndrome. He said he only beat me the one time. And so we go back to the past. Louis left the home feeling shame, at least that's what Louis thinks. But Lestat calls and he comes around with gifts ever so often. And so it's been 6 years since Lestat has been separated from Claudia and Louis. So in 1937, Lestat leaves a record recorded with Antoinette's voice, and boy, does that set Louis off. But Lestat knew that would. So Louis swims the Mississippi River just to confront Lestat. And then Louis proceeds to kick Antoinette out of her own home. And Lestat lets him. Lestat lets him. And Antoinette gets up and goes. And so Louis takes Lestat back. So Claudia and Louis set some rules with Lestat. The first rule is to kill Antoinette. The next rule is that Claudia wants to be viewed as an equal. She wants to be viewed as their sister. And the other rule is no lies. Louis asked a question that's been on my mind, and I'm sure it's been on all of our minds. And that is, did Lestat have anything to do with Paul's death? And so Lestat said no, he would never do that. But I'm not sure that I believe him, to be honest. And then Claudia asked, who made Lestat? And so he tells the backstory of how the vampire Magnus made him. He said that Magnus killed himself. I believe Magnus threw himself into fire and left him with all the money that he has now. So even after they set ground rules, Claudia is really not having it with Lestat. Even after he brings back Antoinette's charred finger for Claudia as a souvenir. But we know that Lestat didn't really kill Antoinette. He just chopped her fingers off. Like poor Antoinette. Like she's giving up her life for this vampire that barely gives a damn about her. Anyway, Claudia and Louis find out that Lestat lied about killing Antoinette. Louis is so numb to all of this. He accepts it. But Claudia is fed up. And so she tries to convince Louis to leave with her to Europe, but he decides not to. But he's supportive of her and gives her permission to go. So she sneaks onto a train, but Lestat finds her and brings her home. So that scene where Lestat has a conductor's head and he's saying, "Tickets, please," is so funny, but chilling at the same time. And then we get another excellent scene where Lestat and Claudia are playing chess. They play chess with each other all the time. He's teaching her. And Claudia is telepathically plotting to kill Lestat. And she's doing this with Louis. She wins at chess, and this sets Louis, not Louis, I'm sorry, this sets Lestat off. So he's just going off. He's mad as hell. And then we get the scene at the end that's set in the 70s in San Francisco. So we see a young Daniel enter a bar and he meets Louis. They banter, and Daniel wants to interview Louis along with some other things. And then we see Rashid. Hmm. Hmm. So I think we all knew that there was something about Rashid. Okay. And him showing up in the 70s, looking the same, proves it. All right, so in the season finale, we learn how vampires can die. It's by starvation, drinking the blood of the dead, fire, and decapitation. Lestat wants to leave New Orleans because the neighbors suspect that there's something off about them. And the neighbors keep leaving Bibles, they're leaving sigils, and all kinds of stuff in front of their home. So Claudia suggests that they go out with a bang by throwing a huge party. At first, Lestat is against the idea because they've become pariahs. So it's like, who's going to show up to this party? But then Lestat changes his mind, and they go to Anderson, who I believe is now a U.S. representative. They ask him for permission to throw Mardi Gras. And they plan for the Mardi Gras festivities for a month. So Anderson does grant them that permission because, of course, he's going to get something out of it. So back in Dubai, Daniel notices that Rashid takes a phone call in the sun. So that distracts him because he's become increasingly suspicious of Rashid. And so have I. It's clear that Daniel doesn't remember meeting Rashid in the 70s. But in the present, he is suspicious because Rashid is sus. Anyway, back in time, their plan is to starve themselves. So this is Lestat, Claudia, and Louis. They're going to starve themselves for 3 nights before the Mardi Gras ball. And Louis and Claudia will be scouting the ball for their big feast. So they're going to be luring the chosen few with the promise of immortality. So while this is all going on, Claudia purchases poison. And so now they're at the ball and they're setting the plan in motion. And so I watch TV and shows with closed caption because it helps me hear better. And so in the scene at the ball, I saw Antoinette's name popped up. And I think it said that he's so pathetic, and this was her thought, like towards Louis. And I was confused at first because I was like, wait, Antoinette is there? And why is Louis hearing her thoughts? And so my silly self did not put two and two together until it was revealed at the end what was happening with Antoinette in that moment. So anyway, Louis and Lestat decide to dance together in front of everybody. And this is a very bold move for queer men in an interracial relationship to display that brazen show of affection. So I was scared for them for a second because I thought that they were going to be harmed. I thought they would be attacked. But then I remembered that the town people are probably afraid of them. I mean, they suspect that they're not human, and so they didn't want any smoke with them. So they didn't do anything. They just, were incredulous. So Claudia butts in and tells Louis that she's already given the poison to the twins who Lestat took a liking to earlier. So now the time has come for them to have their feast. I like that in that scene where they're talking to the chosen few, they reveal their date of birth, when they turn and their current age. So Claudia says, I was born in 1903, drank the water in 1917, and I am 36 years old. Louis was born in 1878, drank the water in 1910, and he's 61 years old. And Lestat is born in 1960, drank the water in 1974, and he's going to be 180 years old in November, which we share a birth month. So After all of that, Anderson gets impatient and they realize that there's no like fountain of youth, and Lestat jumps him and the massacre begins. So it is such a gruesome scene. I loved when all three of them were like walking. It was like they were gliding through the house and they turn the corner. They're all in white and they're just covered in blood. It was such a good scene. Louis and Claudia save one of the twins for Lestat. And Lestat thinks that he has this all figured out. He thinks he knows what's going on. That's because Antoinette has been his spy. Okay, so she steps on the scene and it is revealed that she's a vampire and she's been spying on Louis and Claudia. So Antoinette tells Lestat that the twins were poisoned. But baby, Claudia, she played them all. Okay? Claudia figured out what was going on with Antoinette. And that's why she didn't share much information with Louis because she knew she couldn't, trust him with that information. She also knew Antoinette was in the cut listening. And so the poison was actually given to Anderson, who Lestat fed on earlier, because she knew that Lestat would go after him first. Claudia is very cunning. I loved seeing Claudia's development from a silly, boisterous teenager to a smart, grown woman. Anyway, Louis reluctantly slices Lestat's neck and he bleeds out. And Claudia writes Lestat's last dying words in his own blood. So that was very cold blooded of Claudia to do. And so they burned the bodies, including Antoinette's. Poor Antoinette, she just got a really raw deal. I don't even think she was a vampire for that long. And so Louis tells Daniel that they just couldn't burn Lestat. So they rolled him up in the carpet and dumped him in the garbage. So Daniel knows that this is a neat, tidy ending, right? He says, the pages of Claudia's diary were removed with a ruler. And he got the sense that Claudia really hated Louis for a while after that. So Daniel is basically calling bullshit and calls Louis out on sparing Lestat's life by not burning him. So Daniel explains, like the trash goes to the dump. That's where the rats are. So Lestat would be able to survive off of rat blood. So Rashid jumps up and ends the session. Daniel's like, hold up. Let me test you because you are real sus right now. How come you didn't pass out when Louis sucked your blood, but a big bouncer did? Right? And then he was also like, you weigh this amount of pounds. Like, what is going on with you, Rashid? So Daniel tells Louis, you've chosen to stop over Claudia time and time again, like you've always done. And this upsets Louis. So he, goes to another room. He leaves the room. He storms out. He's digging his feet into what looks like sand. And I was wondering if this was just some sort of self-soothing method for him. And Daniel is like, you need 100 sessions of EMDR. And I absolutely agree with Daniel. So while Daniel is going off on Louis, we notice Rashid is in the back, right? He's blurred in the back. He's taking out his contacts. He's removing his gloves. And then he starts floating. And I'm like, oh shit, he's a vampire. I knew it. Rashid reveals that he's Louis' protector. When Louis acts out, he's there to keep him in line. And he confirms that he was there the night that they met in the bar in the 1970s. So, as I mentioned earlier, Daniel doesn't remember Rashid. Daniel was using drugs back then, so he doesn't remember what happened. But Daniel's like, but you were standing in the sun. And Rashid was like, please, what's a mediocre star to a 514-year-old vampire? Not him calling the sun a mediocre star. And then Louis says, this is what Louis says. He goes, Daniel Malloy, I'd like you to meet the vampire Armand, the love of my life. Louis is so dramatic. And he sounded kind of strained when he said the love of my life. I saw some people online saying that they think that Armand may have mind control over Louis. So I guess we'll see, or I'll see in season two. So I wasn't shocked by the reveal that Rashid is a vampire because they were dropping hints in previous episodes, but I wasn't expecting him to be the vampire Armand. So I mentioned earlier that I did read the book. I read some of the books, and I do remember the name Armand, but I don't remember much about Armand's story. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in season two. So, like I said before, this was a really, really great show. It is one of the few shows recently that has kept my attention. I was really engaged. And so now I need to find another email to get a free trial for AMC Plus so that I can watch season two. All right, so thank you for sticking with me until the end. What did you guys think of season one of Interview with the Vampire? Leave your comments down below, like this video, subscribe if you like my content, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.